The desert wind howled like a forgotten ghost across the cracked asphalt of Route 17, carrying the faint scent of sagebrush and distant rain. It was just past midnight when the old pickup truck skidded to a halt on the shoulder, its headlights cutting through the blackness like accusatory fingers. Inside, a small boy, no more than 8, clutched the frayed edge of the seat, his wide eyes reflecting the glow of the dashboard. His mother, pale and trembling, had pulled over in a panic, her hands shaking as she fumbled with the phone that had no signal out here. The boy, little Lucas, had been crying softly for miles, his tiny frame bruised from the rough hands of men who shouldn't have touched him. Whispers of trouble back in town, a custody fight gone wrong, shadowy figures demanding what wasn't theirs. Now, stranded and terrified, they were easy prey under the vast, indifferent stars. That's when the rumble started, a low, thunderous growl that vibrated through the ground like the earth's own heartbeat. Headlights pierced the night, not one or two, but a line of them, stretching back into the darkness. Harleys mostly, their chrome gleaming under the moon, engines snarling in unison. At the lead rode Ethan Hale, a weathered man in his 40s, his leather vest patched with the insignia of the Iron Vow Riders, a faded emblem of crossed axes over a promise etched in iron. Ethan's face was a map of old scars, a jagged line across his jaw from a bar fight in '09, eyes shadowed by losses he never spoke of. He'd buried his own brother to desert sands years ago, sworn an oath to protect the vulnerable after that, but life had worn him down to solitary rides, chasing ghosts on empty roads. The convoy slowed as Ethan spotted the truck, his bike easing to a stop mere feet away. The boy peeked out the window, his tears drying in the sudden shift of fate. Ethan killed the engine, the silence amplifying the boy's sniffles. He dismounted with the grace of someone who'd stared down worse than fear, his boots crunching on gravel. "You folks all right?" he called, voice gravelly but steady, like the hum of a well-tuned motor. The mother, Sophia, stepped out, her arms wrapping protectively around Lucas. She was a shadow of the woman Ethan vaguely remembered from a rainy night a decade ago, brief, intense, a connection forged in desperation during his wandering days. But that was before promises faded, before he rode away without looking back. We need help," she stammered, glancing nervously at the horizon as if expecting pursuit. "They're after us. My ex, he's got connections, won't let go." Ethan's gaze dropped to the boy, who stared up at him with an intensity that pierced like a blade. Lucas tugged at his mother's sleeve, then whispered something so soft it barely carried on the wind. But Ethan heard it, clear as a vow. "Mom says you're my real dad." The words hung in the air, heavier than the desert dust settling around them. Ethan's world tilted, a forgotten night, a whispered assurance he'd dismissed as fleeting comfort. He'd left Sophia behind, carrying the weight of his own fractured past. A war vet haunted by brothers lost in the sands, a promise to his dying sibling to live honorably, to shield the innocent. But this was a secret blooming from neglect, a child's trust in a truth half buried. Sophia's eyes met his, pleading, confirming without a word. The convoy idled behind, 50 strong, Ethan's chosen family, riders bound by oaths older than blood. They'd drop everything for him, for this. In that moment, under the flickering stars, Ethan felt the pull of an ancient promise resurfacing, not just to Sophia, but to the boy who'd claimed him. He knelt to Lucas's level, the leather of his gloves creaking. "Is that so, kid? Well, real dads don't leave folks stranded." His voice cracked just a fraction, betraying the storm inside. He stood, signaling to his crew with a nod. Engines revved again, a protective wall forming around the truck. "We'll get you safe. Ride with us to the next town. Then we talk." Sophia hesitated, then nodded. buckling Lucas in as Ethan climbed back on his bike. The convoy moved out, a steel serpent cutting through the night, headlights banishing shadows. But as the miles blurred, Ethan's mind raced. Who was after them? Why now, after all these years? The boy's whisper echoed, stirring doubts. Was he ready to face a truth that could shatter his solitary code? The Iron Vow riders weren't just bikers. They were guardians of forgotten oaths, men and women who'd traded blood ties for loyalty forged in fire. Ethan had led them through storms, corrupt sheriffs, cartel whispers, lost causes, but this felt personal, a reckoning. Dawn crept over the horizon as they rolled into a dusty motel on the edge of Willow Creek, a forgotten speck of a town where neon signs buzzed like weary fireflies. The crew fanned out, securing the perimeter. Jax, the burly enforcer with tattoos mapping his war scars, checked the rooms. Lena, the sharp-eyed medic who'd patched Ethan up more times than he could count, tended to Lucas's scrapes with gentle hands. Sophia watched from the doorway, exhaustion etching lines on her face. "I never wanted to drag you back in," she said quietly as Ethan approached, the boy asleep on the bed behind her. "But after your brother, you promised you'd always have my back if things went south." Ethan leaned against the doorframe, the scent of stale coffee from the motel's pot mingling with the faint tang of engine oil on his clothes. "South? This is a damn abyss, Soph. Who are these guys chasing you?" She explained in hushed tones. Her ex, Victor Kane, a small-time operator with ties to crooked officials, fighting dirty for custody after she'd fled an abusive hold. Evidence vanished, judges bought, until she uncovered papers hinting at deeper rot. And Lucas. The boy was the key. Innocent eyes seeing too much. Ethan's jaw tightened. Redemption wasn't a word he threw around. It was etched in every mile he'd ridden alone. But here, with the child's whisper still ringing, he felt the old oath stir. "We'll handle it. DNA or no, that kid's under my wing now." He stepped inside, the room's dim lamp casting long shadows, like fingers reaching for truths long hidden. As the sun climbed, painting the motel in golden hues, Ethan gathered his crew in the parking lot. Bikes gleamed, ready for whatever came. Little did they know, a single test would unravel everything, exposing lies, forging unbreakable bonds, and testing the honor that bound them. The ride had just begun, a promise reborn in the whisper of a child. Word count 872. The morning sun hung low over Willow Creek, casting elongated shadows across the motel's cracked parking lot, like fingers scraping at buried secrets. Ethan Hale stood at the edge of the asphalt, his calloused hands gripping the handlebars of his Harley, the metal still warm from the night's ride. The air carried the sharp bite of dew-kissed dust and the faint, acrid whiff of cooling engines, a reminder that safety was fleeting in places like this. Behind him, the Iron Vow riders milled about, 50 souls bound not by blood, but by oaths sworn in the heat of forgotten battles. Jax, broad-shouldered and etched with ink that told tales of desert skirmishes, leaned against his bike, sharpening a knife with rhythmic scrapes. Lena, her ponytail tied back with a strip of leather, checked her medical kit, her eyes flicking toward the motel room where Sophia and Lucas rested. Ethan's mind churned like the gravel under his boots. The boy's whisper from the night before echoed in his skull, a fragile thread pulling at the edges of his armored heart. He'd ridden solo for years after losing his brother, burying the pain in endless horizons, honoring a deathbed vow to protect without strings. But Sophia's reappearance, with a child who looked at him like he was the anchor in a storm, cracked that facade. "Real dad," Lucas had said, innocent and unyielding. Ethan rubbed the scar on his jaw, the old wound throbbing as if alive again. He needed answers, not just for the kid, but to silence the doubt gnawing at his core. Inside the room, Sophia sat on the edge of the sagging bed, her fingers tracing patterns on Lucas's sleeping form. The boy had finally drifted off after Lena's gentle care. scrapes cleaned, bruises fading under soft bandages. The room smelled of antiseptic and stale sheets, a temporary sanctuary in a world closing in. Sophia's eyes, red-rimmed from vigil, lifted as Ethan entered, the door creaking like a hesitant confession. "He's out cold," she murmured, voice barely above the hum of the ancient air conditioner. "First real sleep in days." Ethan nodded, pulling up a rickety chair, its legs scraping the linoleum. "We can't stay here long. Tell me everything, Soph. From the beginning." She hesitated, glancing at the window where dust motes danced in the light, then began. "It started 2 years back," she said, after Victor Kane's grip tightened. Victor, a slick operator in the county's underbelly, with friends in high places, judges who looked the other way, cops who filed reports into oblivion. He'd claimed Lucas in a custody war, painting Sophia as unstable, but she'd seen the signs. Victor's men roughing up witnesses, documents vanishing like smoke. And Lucas. The boy had witnessed too much, a quiet observer to shadows that shouldn't touch a child. "But why run now?" Ethan pressed, his voice low, the weight of his vest seeming heavier. Sophia leaned forward, her whisper urgent. "I found papers in his desk, hints of something bigger, embezzlement, maybe ties to those border runners we've heard about. And Lucas, he let slip to a neighbor kid about the bad men at Daddy's house. Victor panicked, sent goons after us. That's when I remembered you, your promise after that night we shared. You said if I ever needed a shield." Ethan's gaze drifted to Lucas, the boy's chest rising and falling in peaceful rhythm. The resemblance hit him then. The curve of the jaw, the stubborn set of the brow, mirrors of his own reflection in dusty truck stop mirrors. A decade ago, in a rain-lashed diner off Route 66, he'd given Sophia more than comfort, a fleeting vow born of shared loneliness. He'd ridden off at dawn, chasing redemption for his brother's ghost, never imagining roots taking hold. "We'll get a test," he said finally, the words tasting like gravel. "DNA, clear the air, but until then, he's ours to protect." Outside, the crew's murmurs grew as a black SUV crested the horizon, kicking up a plume of dust that stained the sky like an omen. Jack straightened, his hand dropping to the holster hidden under his jacket. "Company!" he growled, voice carrying over the lot. Ethan stepped out, shielding the motel door with his frame, the sun glinting off his rings like warning flares. The vehicle pulled up slow, deliberate, 2 men in crisp suits emerging, city types out of place amid the bikes. The driver, a wiry man with a badge glinting on his belt, eyed the convoy with thinly veiled disdain. "Sheriff's deputies," he announced, flashing credentials that looked too new, too clean. "We're looking for Sophia Reyes, reports of a disturbance last night." Ethan's stance widened, boots planted firm. "No Sophia here, just travelers grabbing coffee." The air thickened, tension coiling like a spring. Lena moved subtly, positioning herself between the rooms and the intruders, her medic's calm masking the steel beneath. The second deputy scanned the bikes, his lip curling. "Funny how a whole pack shows up for coffee. Step aside, buddy, this is official." But Ethan didn't budge, his eyes locking with the man's, a silent challenge forged in years of facing down worse. Behind him, Sophia's shadow shifted in the doorway, Lucas stirring with a soft whimper. The promise Ethan had made to his brother resurfaced: shield the innocent, no matter the cost. These weren't protectors, their polished shoes hid the rot Sophia described. "Official don't mean right," Ethan replied, voice steady as engine idle. "And we're not moving till you do." The standoff stretched, seconds ticking like a countdown. Jax flanked Ethan, the crew forming a loose circle, engines rumbling to life in subtle threat, not aggression, but unyielding presence. The deputies exchanged glances, the wiry one reaching for his radio. Static crackled, then a voice, "Stand down, backup's en route." But Ethan saw the flicker in their eyes. Bluff or fear? It didn't matter. This was the first ripple of the storm, a test of the oaths that bound them. As the SUV reversed, tires spitting gravel, Ethan turned back to the motel. Sophia met him at the door, Lucas now awake and clinging to her leg, peeking out with wide, trusting eyes. "They'll be back," she said, fear threading her words. Ethan knelt, meeting the boy's gaze. "Let 'em. We've got your back, kid. All of us." The crew nodded in unison, a family forged in fire, ready to ride into the unknown. The DNA test loomed like a horizon storm, truths waiting to shatter illusions, bonds waiting to solidify. But for now, in the golden light of Willow Creek, Ethan felt the stir of purpose, a promise reborn not in blood, but in the quiet courage of standing firm. And now, I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from and the exact hour you heard this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel and at what moments they reach you. The dust from the retreating SUV still swirled in lazy eddies across the motel lot, settling like unspoken threats on the sun-warmed asphalt. Ethan Hale watched it fade, his grip tightening on the doorframe until his knuckles blanched white beneath the leather gloves. The air hummed with the low growl of idling engines, a chorus of loyalty from the Iron Vow riders who flanked him like shadows given form. Jack spat into the gravel, his massive frame coiled like a spring, while Lena holstered a small canister of pepper spray in her kit, her expression a mask of calculated calm. Inside the room, Sophia held Lucas close, the boy's small hand clutching her shirt as if it were the last tether to safety. The standoff had passed without shots fired, but the echo of authority's bluff lingered, a sour note in the morning's fragile peace. Ethan turned back to the group, his boots scraping the threshold. "We move! Now! This town's too small for their games." His voice carried the weight of command, honed from years leading men through sand-swept patrols and back-alley reckonings. The crew nodded, a ripple of motion as they mounted up, tires crunching, leathers creaking, the scent of oil and sweat mingling with the faint metallic tang of tension. Sophia gathered their meager bags, Lucas trailing her like a shadow, his eyes darting to Ethan with a mix of awe and uncertainty. The boy hadn't spoken much since the whisper in the desert night, but his gaze said enough. Trust. Fragile and flickering, like a match struck in wind. They rode out in formation, the convoy a thunderous shield around the old pickup. Ethan led point, his Harley cutting the air with purposeful slices, the wind whipping at his vest where the Iron Vow emblem caught the climbing sun. Miles blurred into a hypnotic rhythm, sagebrush whipping past, the horizon a shimmering promise of escape. Willow Creek shrank in the rear view, but Ethan knew pursuit wasn't far behind. Victor Kane's reach extended like roots in poisoned soil, twisting through officials who'd trade justice for favors. Sophia had painted the picture in hushed fragments, a man who'd built an empire on whispers and vanished evidence, now cornered by a child's innocent words. Lucas had seen things, rough shadows in the night, voices raised in anger, that could unravel it all. And Ethan, he was the wild card, a ghost from Sophia's past, summoned by desperation. By midday, they veered off Route 17 onto a forgotten dirt track, leading to an old safe house the riders maintained, a weathered cabin nestled in a canyon's embrace where pinon pines whispered secrets to the wind. The structure loomed like a sentinel, its timber walls scarred by storms and time, roof patched with corrugated metal that rattled softly in the breeze. Ethan killed his engine first, the sudden silence amplifying the boys' soft gasp as they pulled up. "This is home for now," Ethan said, dismounting and offering a hand to help Sophia down. Her fingers brushed his, a spark of old familiarity igniting brief warmth amid the chill of uncertainty. Lucas slid out after, his sneakers kicking up red dust, eyes wide at the ring of bikes forming a perimeter. Inside, The cabin smelled of aged wood and faint pine resin, sunlight slanting through cracked windows to paint golden bars on the plank floor. Lena set to work immediately, unpacking supplies onto a scarred oak table. Bandages, water purifiers, and a small cooler with ice packs for any brewing troubles. Jax barred the door with a heavy beam, his knife now sheathed, but ever ready. "Scouts out," he grunted to Ethan. "I'll take first watch with Marco. No one's slipping through these rocks." The crew dispersed efficiently, some tending bikes, others scanning the ridgeline, bound by the unspoken code that had pulled them from their own shattered lives. Ethan had found most of them on the road, war vets like himself, runaways fleeing corruption, souls seeking redemption in the roar of engines and the honor of kept promises. Sophia settled Lucas on a threadbare couch, the boy curling up with a worn stuffed bear clutched to his chest. "He likes stories," she said softly, catching Ethan's eye as he paced the room. "About heroes who come back." The words landed like gravel in his throat. Ethan knelt beside the couch, the floorboards creaking under his weight. "Hey, kid, ever hear about the Iron Vow? It's like a promise you engrave on your heart. Can't break it, no matter how far you ride." Lucas's eyes lit up, the fear easing just a fraction. "Did you make one to my mom?" The question hung, innocent as dawn light, but it pierced Ethan deeper than any blade. He glanced at Sophia, her nod subtle, confirming the thread of connection from that rainy night long ago. "We need that test," Ethan said later, as the sun dipped toward the canyon rim, casting the cabin in amber glows. He'd radioed ahead to a contact in the next town over, a discreet clinic run by an old army buddy. No questions, no traces. Lena prepped a basic kit from her supplies, enough for a preliminary swab. But the real proof waited at Dawn's ride. "If it's true," Sophia whispered, joining him on the porch where the air cooled to a crisp edge, stars pricking the twilight sky. "Victor's lies crumble, but he'll fight dirty." Ethan leaned on the railing, the wood rough under his palms, the distant howl of coyotes underscoring her words. His brother's voice echoed in memory, a dying whisper in the desert heat. "Protect what's yours, Ethan. Don't let the world take it." He'd failed once, riding away from Sophia, burying the what-ifs under miles of blacktop. Not again. As night deepened, the crew gathered around a low fire pit outside, flames crackling like shared confessions. Stories flowed, tales of narrow escapes, oaths fulfilled, binding them tighter. Lucas peeked from the door, drawn by the warmth, and Ethan pulled him onto his knee, the boy's weight a novel anchor. "You're safe here," he murmured, the firelight dancing on their faces. But in the shadows beyond the fire's reach, doubt flickered. What if the test lied? What if blood didn't bind, only choice did? Sophia watched from the doorway, her expression a mosaic of hope and haunted regret. Then a crackle on the radio shattered the quiet. Jax's voice, urgent from the ridge. "Lights incoming. 2 vehicles unmarked. 5 minutes out." Ethan stood, handing Lucas to Lena, the crew springing to action like a well-oiled machine. Engines whispered to life, not roaring yet, but ready. The promise stirred anew, a vow against the encroaching dark. This family of the road would stand, truths be damned, until the dawn brought clarity, or chaos. The canyon winds picked up, carrying the faint rumble of approaching engines as Ethan mounted his bike, the metal cool against his resolve. The test awaited, but so did the storm. In the heart of it all, a child's whisper had ignited a fire that no shadow could extinguish. The canyon's jagged walls loomed like silent judges under the star-pricked sky, their shadows swallowing the faint glow of the fire pit as the rumble grew into a menacing growl. Ethan Hale's heart pounded in sync with his Harley's engine, the vibration traveling up his arms like a warning pulse. The air turned thick with the scent of dry earth and impending rain, dust devils swirling in the distance as if stirred by the same unrest churning inside him. He scanned the ridgeline, where Jax's silhouette stood etched against the moon, rifle slung low, not for show but a quiet testament to the oaths that had kept them alive through darker nights. Lena herded Lucas and Sophia deeper into the cabin, the door's heavy thud echoing like a final breath held. 2 trucks, blacked out! Jax's voice crackled over the radio, clipped and urgent. Coming slow. Victor's boys, I'd bet my patch. Ethan's jaw clenched, the scar on his face pulling tight. Victor Kane, the name slithered through his thoughts like oil on water. A man who'd poisoned Sophia's life with strings of influence and veiled threats. The crew fanned out without a word. Marco and Tyler taking flanks on their bikes, engines muffled to whispers, others melting into the rocks, eyes sharp as the coyotes that howled in approval. This wasn't a brawl for territory. It was a stand for the fragile trust blooming in Lucas's wide eyes. For the promise Ethan had buried under years of solitary miles. The vehicles crested the trail, headlights off, their tires crunching gravel like teeth on bone. They halted 50 yards out, doors swinging open to spill 4 figures into the moonlight. Rough types in dark jackets, faces hardened by the kind of work that left stains no soap could touch. No badges this time, just the raw edge of hired muscle, guns holstered but hands hovering. The leader, a stocky man with a shaved head and a tattoo creeping from his collar, stepped forward, his boots kicking up puffs of red dust that caught the pale light. "We know she's in there," he called, voice gravelly, carrying over the wind. "Hand her over, and the kid too. No need for mess." Ethan dismounted, his boots hitting the ground with deliberate weight, the leather of his vest creaking as he straightened. He walked into the open, empty hands visible, but his presence a wall of unyielding resolve. The fire pit's embers popped behind him, casting flickering shadows that danced like restless spirits. "This ain't your ground," he replied, tone even, laced with the steel of a man who'd stared down sandstorms and worse. "And that family's under vow. Ride on, or find out what that means." The leader smirked, but it didn't reach his eyes. Cold calculations flickering there, weighing the odds against the ring of bikes glinting like drawn blades. One of his men shifted, a radio buzzing faintly at his belt, whispering updates from unseen ears. Victor's web, Ethan realized, stretched far, pulling strings from shadowed offices where justice bent like reeds in a gale. Sophia's words from earlier echoed, the papers she'd glimpsed, ledgers hinting at siphoned funds and deals with border shadows, all shielded by men like these. Lucas's innocent slip had cracked it open, a child's truth threatening an empire built on lies. From the cabin's edge, Sophia watched through a slit in the boarded window, her breath shallow, Lucas pressed against her side. The boy's small fingers dug into her arm, but he didn't cry. Strength borrowed from the stories Ethan had spun by the fire, tales of riders who turned the tide with honor alone. "He's standing for us," Lucas whispered, awe threading his fear. The words a balm against the night's chill. Sophia nodded, her heart a tangle of regret and fierce gratitude. That rainy diner decade ago, Ethan's arms a temporary harbor after her world's collapse. Now it circled back, demanding he honor the seed of that night. Tension coiled tighter as the leader took another step, his hand inching toward his sidearm. "Vow? That's biker fairy tales. Boss says the woman's unstable, kid's better off without her delusions." The lie hung foul, stirring the crew like a spark to dry tinder. Jax's shadow moved on the ridge, a subtle shift that spoke volumes. Ethan held his ground, the wind tugging at his hair, carrying the faint, clean scent of pine from the canyon depths. "Delusions? Or truths you bury? We've seen your kind. Twist words, vanish evidence, but oaths like ours, they outlast your bosses." A beat of silence stretched, broken only by the distant call of an owl, as if the canyon itself waited judgment. The leader's eyes narrowed, scanning the perimeter, spotting the glint of eyes in the dark. Bluff met steel, and something shifted. The man's radio crackled again, urgent voices murmuring retreat. Victor's caution, perhaps, or the weight of 50 riders ready to become a storm. "This ain't over," the leader spat, backing toward the trucks. Engines roared to life, taillights flaring red like warnings as they peeled away, swallowed by the trail's twist. Ethan exhaled slowly, the crew emerging from shadows, murmurs of relief rippling like aftershocks. He signaled them back to the cabin. The fire stoked anew to chase the cold. Inside, Lucas ran to him, wrapping arms around his leg in a hug that squeezed Ethan's chest like a vice. "You made them go," the boy said, looking up with eyes that mirrored his own, stubborn, hopeful. Ethan ruffled his hair, the gesture awkward but genuine, a crack in the armor he'd worn too long. "We all did, kid. That's the vow." Sophia approached, her expression softening in the lamplight's warm glow. "Thank you," she murmured, hand brushing his arm, reigniting embers from forgotten nights. But doubt lingered in her eyes. The test tomorrow, truths that could bind or break. Ethan nodded toward the table where Lena laid out the swab kit, simple tools gleaming under the bulb. Dawn ride to the clinic, no more running blind. The crew settled in, watches rotated, the cabin a fortress of shared breaths and quiet resolve. As the night deepened, Ethan stepped onto the porch, the canyon's vastness unfolding below like a map of possibilities. His brother's promise whispered on the breeze, "Protect what's yours." Lucas's claim had unearthed it, forcing him to confront the man he'd become. Solitary guardian or father in the making, the rider's loyalty anchored him, a chosen family proving blood was just one thread in the weave of honor. Miles away, Victor Kane paced a dimly lit office, the air heavy with cigar smoke and frustration. Reports filtered in, the bikers unyielding, the woman slipping through fingers. But he had aces, doctored files, a judge in pocket. The DNA, a wild card he could spin. Yet, as dawn neared, a seed of unease took root. Oaths like Ethan's didn't bend. They forged paths through storms. Back in the cabin, Ethan watched Lucas sleep, the boy's face peaceful, a testament to fragile trust. The test loomed, a horizon of revelation. But in that quiet vigil, Ethan felt the stir of redemption, not in proving blood, but in choosing to stand. The iron vow pulsed stronger, a promise etched deeper than scars, ready for whatever light the morning brought. If this chapter stirred something in you, hit that like button. It helps spread these stories of honor and heart to those who need them most. The first light of dawn crept over the canyon's rim like a hesitant ally, painting the safe house in soft pinks and golds that belied the night's lingering chill. Ethan Hale stood on the porch, steam rising from a chipped mug of black coffee clutched in his gloved hand, the bitter aroma cutting through the crisp, pine-scented air. His Harley idled nearby, a low rumble vibrating the timbers beneath his boots, while the Iron Vow riders stirred to life around him, engines coughing awake, leathers zipping up against the morning bite. Jax lumbered out from the cabin, his broad frame silhouetted against the open door, nodding toward the trail where scouts had cleared the path. "All quiet for now." The words carried the weight of hard-won vigilance, a reminder that Victor Kane's shadows didn't fade with the sun. Inside, Sophia knelt beside Lucas, helping the boy shrug into a too-big jacket borrowed from Lena's pack. The cabin's air still held the faint smokiness from last night's fire, mingling with the clean tang of dew on the wooden beams. Lucas's eyes, bright with the innocence that had first pierced Ethan's armor, flicked toward the window, where bikes gleamed like promises forged in steel. "Are we going to the doctor place now?" he asked, voice small but steady, clutching the stuffed bear tighter. Sophia smoothed his hair, her touch gentle, yet laced with the tension of a mother guarding her world. "Yeah, buddy, to find out the truth, Ethan's taking us." She met Ethan's gaze across the room. A silent exchange, heavy with the unsaid. The rainy night that had planted this seed, the years of silence that had let it grow unchecked. Ethan stepped inside, the floorboards groaning under his weight, and crouched to Lucas's level. The boy's face, so achingly familiar in the morning light, stirred something deep, a pull toward the family he'd never claimed, echoing his brother's dying oath to protect without hesitation. "It's just a quick check, kid," like a story coming true. Lucas nodded, a tentative smile breaking through, and extended a small hand. Ethan took it, the warmth surprising against his calloused palm, a bridge across the chasm of doubt. The crew assembled outside, a convoy of 20 now, the rest holding the safe house against any tail. Lena swung onto her bike, medical bag strapped secure, her ponytail whipping in the breeze. "I'll ride shotgun in the truck with them," she said, voice firm. "Kit's ready for the swab en route if we need it." They rolled out in tight formation, Ethan's lead bike slicing through the canyon's winding trail, dust trailing like a veil behind the pickup. The sun climbed higher, warming the air and turning the red earth to shimmering waves. But Ethan's mind raced ahead to the clinic in Eldridge Hollow, a nondescript building on the town's edge, run by Doc Harlan, an old squadmate who traded battlefield patches for quiet discretion. No digital trails, no questions, just results sealed in envelopes that could rewrite fates. Sophia's story had filled in the gaps during the night watch. Victor's empire, built on skimmed contracts and favors from bent officials, now threatened by Lucas's offhand words to a neighbor. The boy had described scary meetings in the garage, voices murmuring about hidden ledgers, enough to spark an investigation if it reached the right ears. Victor's response? Pursuit, relentless and veiled, painting Sophia as the villain to reclaim control. Miles melted away, the convoy weaving through scrubland, where sagebrush whispered against tires. Ethan glanced in his mirror, catching Sophia's profile in the truck, tense, watchful, her hand on Lucas's knee. The whisper from the desert night replayed, "Mum says you're my real dad." It had ignited this ride, pulling him from solitary horizons into a storm of what-ifs. Redemption wasn't a distant echo anymore. It rode shotgun, demanding he face the man who'd ridden away once before. Jax pulled alongside briefly, his bike's growl syncing with Ethan's. "Eyes on the rear," he shouted over the wind, pointing back. Ethan nodded, spotting a distant glint, mirrors, or just heat haze. The crew tightened up, a living barrier of loyalty, each rider carrying their own scars. Lena's from a corrupt hospital that cost her license, Marco's from a war that stole his kin. They were the iron vow, oaths etched deeper than ink, standing for the forgotten. Eldridge Hollow emerged like a mirage, its main street lined with faded storefronts and the clinic's plain sign swinging lazily in the breeze. They pulled into the back lot, bikes forming a discreet semicircle to shield the entrance. Doc Harlan waited at the door, a lanky figure in wire-rimmed glasses, his white coat a stark contrast to the dust-caked convoy. "Ethan," he greeted with a firm handshake, eyes scanning the group without judgment. "Heard you were coming. Rooms prepped." Inside, the clinic smelled of antiseptic and fresh linen, fluorescent lights humming softly overhead. Sophia sat with Lucas on a paper-covered exam table, the boy swinging his legs, curiosity edging out nerves. Lena hovered nearby, her presence a calm anchor. The procedure was swift, clinical, swabs from Lucas's cheek, then Ethan's, sealed in sterile tubes under Harlan's steady hands. No words passed about parentage, just the quiet efficiency of men who'd seen too much to pry. "Results by end of day," Harlan said, pocketing the samples. "Courier to the safe house, off the grid." Ethan exhaled, the room's cool air doing little to ease the knot in his chest. As they filed out, Lucas tugged his sleeve. "What if it's true? Do I get to ride with you?" The question landed soft, but it cracked Ethan's resolve further. "If it's true, kid, you're already riding. Vows got you." Back on the bikes, the return ride carried a charged undercurrent, the sun now high and unrelenting, making the road into a ribbon of heat. Ethan led with purpose, but his thoughts tangled, blood ties or chosen ones, Victor's web closing in. Halfway back, Jax's radio crackled. Trouble at the safe house, a scout spotting unmarked vans circling. The convoy surged, engines roaring defiance. Sophia's voice came faint over the truck's open window. "He's coming for us!" Ethan gunned his throttle, the wind tearing at him, carrying the scent of resolve. The test wasn't just paper, it was a spark in the powder keg of truths long buried. They crested the canyon's edge as shadows lengthened, the safe house a beacon amid the rocks. No signs of breach yet, but the air hummed with anticipation. Inside, the crew debriefed by the fire pit, flames licking the dusk. Lucas played nearby with a stick, drawing motorcycle shapes in the dirt, oblivious to the stakes. Sophia joined Ethan on the porch, her shoulder brushing his. "Whatever it says, thank you for this." He looked at her, the fading light softening the lines of worry on her face. "Oaths don't wait for proof, Soph. They just are." Hours ticked by, the courier's arrival marked by a lone bike rumbling up the trail. Harlan's envelope, plain and unassuming, landed in Ethan's hands like a grenade. The crew gathered in the cabin's dim light, breaths held as he slit it open. The paper rustled, words blurring under his gaze. Match confirmed, probabilities irrefutable. But the real shock? A footnote, scrawled in Harlan's hand. Traces in the sample hinting at something off. Not with Ethan, but Victor's shadow. Doctored records, a deeper lie unraveling. Ethan's world steadied, then expanded, father by blood, guardian by choice. Lucas's whisper had been right, but the truth ran deeper, exposing Victor's fraud not just in custody, but in the boy's very lineage claims. Sophia gasped, tears tracing silent paths, while Lucas beamed, sensing the shift without words. The crew erupted in quiet cheers, fists bumping, a family sealed anew. But Ethan's eyes hardened toward the horizon. Victor's empire teetered. This was the spark. The vow burned brighter, ready to ride into the fray, honor demanding justice beyond blood. The cabin's lamplight flickered like a heartbeat in the gathering dusk, casting elongated shadows across the scarred oak table where the envelope lay open, its contents a seismic shift in the quiet air. Ethan Hale stared at the paper, the words "paternity confirmed" blurring under the weight of Harlan's scrawled note. Anomalies in the records, traces suggesting Victor Kane's custody claims were forged from the start, built on falsified timelines and buried truths. The scent of cooling pine resin mingled with the faint, acrid bite of the fire pit outside, where embers popped softly, mirroring the spark igniting in Ethan's chest. Lucas, oblivious to the layers beneath, bounced on his toes beside Sophia, his small face alight with unfiltered joy. "So you're my dad? For real?" The boy's voice cut through the hush, pure and piercing, pulling Ethan's gaze from the page. Sophia knelt, enveloping Lucas in a hug that trembled with release, her tears dampening his borrowed jacket. The crew encircled them, Jax's massive arms crossed, a rare grin cracking his tattooed facade, Lena wiping her hands on her jeans, eyes misty behind her practical resolve. Murmurs rippled, fists thumping shoulders in silent solidarity. The Iron Vow riders a tapestry of scarred souls who'd found purpose in moments like this. Ethan folded the paper slowly, the rustle loud in the charged silence, and ruffled Lucas's hair, the gesture steady despite the storm brewing behind his eyes. "Yeah, kid, for real, and that means no one's touching you or your mom, not while we're breathing." His voice, gravelly from years of wind-whipped roads, carried the oath's unyielding core, echoing the promise he'd made to his brother in a far-off desert. Guard the light, no matter the shadows. But celebration fractured as Jax's radio crackled, shattering the warmth. Perimeter breach, 3 vans, closing fast from the east trail, armed, no lights. The words landed like gravel in an engine, the crew snapping to motion with the precision of old instincts. Ethan tucked the envelope into his vest, the paper crinkling against his chest like a talisman. Outside, the canyon's winds howled through the pines, carrying the distant growl of engines that grew into a thunderous approach. Sophia scooped Lucas up, her face paling as she backed toward the cabin's rear door. "Victor's not waiting for courts anymore," she whispered, the fear in her eyes a stark contrast to the hope that had bloomed moments before. Ethan nodded, his scar pulling tight as he grabbed his helmet. "Get the truck prepped. Lena, you're with them. We'll buy time." The night air hit like a slap, cool and laced with the metallic tang of dust stirred by the incoming threat. Ethan's Harley roared to life under him, the vibrations syncing with his pulse as the riders mounted up, 20 strong now, bikes forming a jagged line along the ridgeline like iron sentinels. Jax flanked him, shotguns slung across his back, while Marco and Tyler peeled off to higher ground, their engines fading into the rocks. The vans crested the trail, hulking shadows under the moon, tires spitting red earth as they fanned out, blocking escape routes. Doors flew open, spilling a dozen figures, Victor's enforcers, faces masked in the gloom, weapons glinting with cold intent. No badges, no bluffs. This was the raw underbelly of Kane's empire, men paid to erase loose ends. The lead van's door swung wide and Victor Kane emerged, a silhouette in tailored darkness, his slick hair catching the moonlight like oil on water. He stepped forward, flanked by 2 heavies, his voice slicing through the wind with calculated calm. "Impressive setup, Hale. But this ends tonight. The woman spinning tales and the kid? He's mine by law until you hand him over." Victor's eyes, sharp and predatory, flicked to the cabin where shadows moved behind boarded windows. Ethan dismounted, boots crunching gravel, his presence a deliberate anchor amid the tension coiling like a spring. The air thickened, the faint scent of gun oil mingling with pine, every breath measured. "Law? Yours is bought and buried. That test says different, says you're the fraud here, Victor. Forged papers, stolen years. Walk away or the vow takes over." Victor laughed, a hollow bark that echoed off the canyon walls, but it masked the flicker of unease Ethan spotted, the man's glance toward his radio, as if waiting for reinforcements that might not come. The DNA results weren't just personal, they were dynamite. Harlan's note hinting at embezzled funds tied to Victor's official custody docs, a web of corruption that could topple county officials if exposed. Lucas's innocent words had been the first crack. This confrontation, the shatter, one of Victor's men shifted, raising a pistol, but Jax's growl from the ridge halted him, the click of a safety echoing like judgment. "Try it," Jax rumbled, his voice a low thunder. The riders held, engines idling in a symphony of restrained power, not charging but unmovable, their loyalty a force Victor's money couldn't buy. Sophia appeared at the cabin door, Lucas hidden behind her, the boy's wide eyes peeking out like a fawn in headlights. "He's not yours, Victor! Never was!" Her shout carried defiance born of desperation, the wind whipping her hair as she clutched the doorframe. Victor's face twisted, the mask slipping to reveal the rot beneath, a man who'd built walls of influence to hide his voids, now facing a mirror of truths. He gestured sharply, his men advancing in a loose arc, but Ethan stepped forward, hands open, yet commanding the space. "This ain't about guns or gold, it's about promises kept. I rode away once, won't again. The kid's blood is mine, his heart's with us. Your lies end here." A standoff stretched, seconds bleeding into eternity, the canyon holding its breath. Victor's radio buzzed, urgent whispers filtering through, reports of a tail on his own convoy, perhaps the rider's scouts circling back, or whispers of the DNA leak reaching unseen allies. Doubt crept into his stance, shoulders sagging imperceptibly. "You think this fixes her mess? The system's mine." But Ethan's reply was steel. "Systems corrupt, vows aren't. Ride out, Victor, or we expose it all, starting with that footnote." The words hung, a poetic justice uncoiling, the moral weight tipping the scales. Tension peaked as one enforcer lunged, but Marco's bike surged from the shadows, engine bellowing a warning that scattered the line. Victor raised a hand, halting his men, his eyes locking with Ethan's in a silent duel of wills. Retreat flickered, vans reversing, taillights bleeding red into the night like wounds. They vanished down the trail, the growl fading to echoes, leaving only the wind's sigh and the rider's vigilant hum. Ethan exhaled, the crew converging as Sophia rushed forward, Lucas breaking free to barrel into his legs. "You scared them off, Dad." The title landed like sunlight after storm, sealing the bond beyond paper. Sophia's hand found Ethan's, a quiet anchor amid the adrenaline's ebb. The cabin beckoned, fire stoked for warmth, but Ethan's gaze lingered on the horizon. Victor's flight was temporary, the deeper rot demanded reckoning, exposing the corruption, honoring the vow with justice, not vengeance. The iron vow pulsed, a family chosen in fire, ready for the dawn's next ride. Redemption wasn't claimed, it was ridden, mile by unyielding mile. The canyon's echoes faded into a hushed vigil as the last taillights of Victor's vans dissolved into the night, leaving the air thick with the scent of churned dust and smoldering resolve. Ethan Hale stood rooted on the ridgeline, his chest rising and falling in the cooling breeze that swept through the pines like a cleansing sigh. The moon hung high, silvering the rocks and bikes below, where the Iron Vow riders regrouped in quiet triumph, engines ticking down to stillness, leathers rustling as shoulders clapped in wordless affirmation. Jax lowered his rifle, the metal warm from his grip, and scanned the trail with eyes honed by too many shadows. "They're gone, for tonight." His voice rumbled low, carrying the weight of battles won not with bullets, but with the unbreakable line they'd formed. Inside the cabin, the lamplight spilled warm through the open door, drawing Ethan back like a tether. Sophia sat on the threadbare couch, Lucas curled against her. His small chest rising in exhausted peace, the stuffed bear clutched like a talisman. The room smelled of aged wood and the faint, comforting char of the rekindled fire, flames dancing shadows across the walls like guardians at rest. Sophia looked up as Ethan entered, her face a mosaic of relief and lingering storm clouds, the lines of fear softening in the glow. "He backed down," she whispered, reaching out a hand that trembled just slightly. Ethan took it, his calloused fingers enveloping hers, the contact grounding him amid the whirlwind of truths unearthed. The DNA paper, now folded in his vest, pressed against his heart. A confirmation not just of blood, but of a promise he'd unknowingly kept alive across the miles. Kneeling beside the couch, Ethan brushed a lock of hair from Lucas's forehead, the boy's skin warm and unmarred by the night's chill. The whisper from that desert roadside replayed in his mind, no longer a question, but a vow fulfilled. "Mum says you're my real dad." Ethan's own father had been a ghost, lost to the bottle before the sands of war claimed his brother, leaving only echoes of honor to guide him. Now, this child, his child, stirred that legacy awake, demanding he weave it into something whole. "Rest easy, kid," he murmured, voice rough but tender, like gravel smoothed by rain. Lucas stirred faintly, a sleepy smile curving his lips, trust blooming in the safety they'd carved from chaos. Outside, the crew gathered around the fire pit, sparks ascending like freed confessions into the starlit sky. Lena stoked the flames with a poker, her movements precise, while Marco passed around tin mugs of steaming coffee laced with the faint bite of whiskey, a ritual for unwinding nerves without dulling edges. Jax joined them, settling on a log with a grunt, his tattoos shifting like maps of old wars in the firelight. "Victor's rattled," he said, sipping deep. "That footnote in the results. Harlan says it's gold, ties to skimmed funds from county projects, custody docs faked to cover his tracks. One leak, and his house of cards folds." Ethan nodded from the doorway, the words settling like puzzle pieces. Victor's empire wasn't just personal venom, it was institutional rot, officials turning blind eyes for envelopes of cash, justice bent to shield the guilty. The Iron Vow had faced such shadows before, corrupt badges in border towns, lost causes reclaimed through quiet persistence. This time it was family at stake, blood and chosen intertwined. As dawn's first blush crept over the canyon rim, painting the horizon in strokes of rose and amber, Ethan stepped out to join them. The air carried the crisp promise of new light, dew glistening on the bikes like tears of renewal. Sophia followed, Lucas now awake and trailing her, rubbing sleep from his eyes with tiny fists. The boy spotted Ethan and toddled over, climbing onto his knee by the fire without hesitation, the weight a novel comfort. "Tell me another story, Dad," Lucas said, the title slipping out natural as breath, sealing the bond with innocent certainty. The crew chuckled softly, the sound a balm as Ethan began. A tale of riders who turned back the dark, not with fury, but with the steady glow of kept oaths, engines roaring through storms to deliver the lost home. But peace was a fragile dawn. By mid-morning, the radio hummed with updates from scouts. Victor's retreat had bought time, but ripples spread. A contact in Eldridge Hollow whispering of frantic calls to buried allies, attempts to bury the DNA deeper. Ethan stood, handing Lucas to Sophia with a gentle squeeze. "We ride to the county seat, expose it clean, no guns, just truth." The crew mounted up, the convoy swelling to 30 as word spread through the Vow's network, riders converging from distant roads like iron filings to a magnet. Sophia buckled Lucas into the truck, her eyes meeting Ethan's over the roof, gratitude shining brighter than fear. "You've given us more than a shield," she said, voice steady now. "You've given us a future." He nodded, the scar on his jaw catching the sun, a mark of battles past yielding to this, one of quiet victory. The ride unfolded under a vast blue sky, the road unspooling like a ribbon of redemption, wind-whipping scents of sage and sun-baked earth through the formation. Ethan led, his Harley a steady arrow, thoughts turning inward to his brother's ghost, the promise to protect, now honored in the roar of engines, and the child's laughter echoing from the truck. At the county seat, a squat brick courthouse loomed amid manicured lawns, its facade hiding the cracks Sophia had fled. They pulled up in the public lot, bikes a gleaming testament, drawing stares from passers-by, but no challenges. Inside, Ethan and Sophia presented the envelope to a lone clerk. Harlan's note, amplified by affidavits from riders who'd witnessed the pursuits, testimonies of shadows chasing innocence. Word traveled fast. By afternoon, a judge, uncorrupted, ears pricked by the Vow's quiet influence, called an emergency hearing. Victor arrived disheveled, his tailored armor fraying, flanked by lawyers who stammered as the DNA and footnotes unfolded like a noose. The courtroom air hung heavy with the murmur of shocked officials, whispers of investigations blooming as embezzlement trails led to higher doors. Victor's empire crumbled in measured blows. Custody revoked, charges pending, his web exposed not by violence, but by the unyielding light of truth. He met Ethan's gaze across the room, defeat etching lines deeper than any scar, a man undone by the honor he'd mocked. As the gavel fell, sealing justice's poetic turn, Ethan led his family out into the sunlight, Lucas skipping between them, hand in hand. The riders waited, a phalanx of loyalty, engines ready for the road home, not a place on maps, but one forged in fire and whispers. Sophia leaned into Ethan, the wind carrying the faint rumble of departure, a symphony of new beginnings. Redemption rode with them, a legacy of sacrifice and heart, proving that promises, once kept, outlasted even the darkest storms. In the miles ahead, the iron vow grew stronger, a beacon for the lost, bound by the courage of one child's trust and a father's silent return. Thank you for riding this journey with us to the end. Stories like Ethan's remind us that true family is chosen, and honor never fades. If this tale touched your heart, hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the next chapter of redemption on the road. Your support keeps these northern confessions rolling far and wide.